Hello students, good morning. Today's class is the continuation of the previous class. Our last class was about the characteristics of unscientific induction, and in that regard I had discussed some points. 2 points are still there, which now I am going to discuss. So, the points of characteristics of unscientific induction was that unscientific induction is a form of induction proper because there is an inductive leap. Unscientific induction may also be called imperfect induction because it lacks the characteristics of perfect induction. That much we have discussed. Our next point is that the unscientific induction is called induction per simple enumeration. And it is called induction per simple enumeration because the conclusion is drawn on the ground of mere enumeration or counting of instances. That means when we say all crows are black, here what we are doing? We are establishing the conclusion on the ground of mere enumeration. We have simply perceived crows which are black in color. So, on the ground of mere enumeration or counting of instances, we are establishing the conclusion. So, unscientific induction is called induction per simple enumeration. And lastly, the unscientific induction is unscientific or popular because there is no knowledge of causal connection, and this is very much important. See, actually the basis of unscientific induction is uncontradicted experiences. Uncontradicted experience means we have, so far our perception goes, knowledge goes, we have perceived only black colored crows. So, here the basis of our unscientific induction is uncontradicted experience. No contradiction is there. That means whether there is any negative instances we have or not, we do not go for finding them. No query is made here for finding out any negative instances. We do not go for that. We do not try even to discover or prove any causal connection between two terms. That means when we say all crows are black after perceiving some crows that are black in color. Here there is no causal connection between blackness and crow. That means the quality of a color blackness and crow, between them there is no such causal relation is established. They are not causally related to each other. In order to become a crow, blackness is not its quality or characteristics. It is not the case that if a bird is to be a crow, it has to be black. Things are not like that. So, these two terms, blackness and crow, there is no causal connection. They are not causally related. Crow may be of white color. That white color is not the characteristics of a crow. For example, when you say all men are mortal, here there is a causal connection between the two terms, that is man and mortality. So, in case of all men are mortal, which is an example of an scientific induction, here humanity and mortality, these two terms are causally related. But in case of unscientific induction, when we established a conclusion after perceiving some crows as black, that all crows are black, here no causal connection is there between blackness and crow, but between humanity and mortality there is a causal connection. That is why, as the universal conclusion of unscientific induction is not based on the establishment of a causal connection, as there is no causal connection between two terms in case of unscientific induction. So, the conclusion in case of unscientific induction is always probable. That means it may be true, it may not be true. When you say all crows are black, if you find any single crow of another color other than black, if you find one day crows of other color than black, in that case your conclusion that all crows are black will be a false one. One single instance will make your conclusion false. So, the conclusion of unscientific induction is always probable, because there is no knowledge of causal connection. So, these are the characteristics of unscientific induction. Now, before we start discussing the another proper kinds of induction, that is analogy, because in induction proper there are three kinds of induction: scientific induction, unscientific induction and analogy. So, before going to discuss about analogy, let us explain the distinction between scientific induction and unscientific induction. As we have gone through both these kinds of induction, scientific and unscientific, let us see what are the similarities and what are the differences between these two kinds of induction, scientific and unscientific. You know, scientific induction is the establishment of an universal real proposition based on observation of particular instances in reliance on the law of causation and the law of uniformity of nature. This is the very definition of scientific induction, you know. For example, in case of scientific induction, we establish a general real proposition, that is all men are mortal. In that case, what happens? Observing some instances of death of some men, after observing this, it is concluded that all men are mortal. After observing the death of some men, we establish a conclusion that all men are mortal. Okay. On the other hand, what is unscientific induction? Unscientific induction is the establishment of a universal real proposition based on mere uncontradicted experience without any attempt at discovering and proving a causal connection. Okay. And the example of unscientific induction is that what we do after perceiving some cases or in our experience we have observed only black cross. That means, after perceiving some cases that crows are black, we establish a general proposition that all crows are black. And there is no exception found in this regard. Till today, we have perceived only black crows. And on the basis of this uncontradicted experience, we make the generalization that all crows are black. So, this is the example of an unscientific induction. Now, if we compare these two types of induction, that is scientific and unscientific, we find some points of similarities and some points of differences between these two. Now, let us see what are the similarities and differences. Now, first the similarities, that is the points of similarities. What are the similarities between scientific induction and unscientific induction? First point is, both scientific induction and unscientific induction establish a universal real proposition in the conclusion. All men are mortal. All crows are black. In both the cases, the example of scientific induction is all men are mortal. Unscientific and the example of unscientific induction is all crows are black. So, in both the cases, the conclusion is real proposition as well as universal, because here predicate speaks of all, and it is real proposition because predicate is giving us something new information. In both the cases, scientific and unscientific, we find universal real proposition. Secondly, both these processes are based on observation of particular instances. When you establish the conclusion in case of scientific induction that all men are mortal, you are observing some particular facts, you are observing some particular cases. Say for example, Ram is mortal, Sham is mortal, Jadoo is mortal. You are perceiving some particular instances, and then you are establishing the conclusion that all men are mortal. So, here after observation of particular instances, you are establishing the conclusion. Likewise, in case of unscientific induction also, when you say all crows are black, how do you say? After perceiving some particular instances, that means on the observation of some particular instances, you can say that all crows are black, because you have perceived some crows, this crows, this crows, this crows, this crows as black, and then you are establishing that all crows are black. So, in both the processes, observation of particular instances are very much present. Third points of similarity is that in both there is an inductive leap, that means a passage from the known to the unknown. In both the cases, that means in case of scientific induction as well as in case of unscientific induction, what you are doing? You are, after perceiving some cases with the help of inductive leap, you are jumping from this some to all. After perceiving some cases of death of men, some instances, you jump and say that all men are mortal. Likewise, in case of unscientific induction also, after perceiving some crows as black, with the help of inductive leap, you are jumping from some to all and establishing that all crows are black. So, in both the cases, the inductive leap is very much present. So, here they are similar. Next, inductive leap being an essential characteristics of induction proper, both scientific and unscientific induction are called induction proper. You all know scientific induction and unscientific induction both belongs to the group of induction proper, because induction proper is that kind of induction where the inductive leap is very much present, and in case of scientific induction as well as in case of unscientific induction, the inductive leap is very much present, and that is the reason both of them belongs to the group of induction proper. Finally, in both, that means in case of scientific induction and unscientific induction, the conclusion is drawn on the basis of the belief in the law of the uniformity of nature. That means what? Law of uniformity of nature means same thing will produce same effect under similar circumstances. So, when you perceive some cases that Ram is mortal, Sham is mortal, you are perceiving Jadu is mortal, you are establishing that all men are mortal, because law of uniformity of nature is there, which says that same thing will produce same effect under similar circumstances. If man and mortality are somehow related in one instance, it will be true for all instances, because nature is uniform. Likewise, in case of unscientific induction also, when you are perceiving some crows as black, with the help of the law of the uniformity of nature, you can say that all crows are black, because nature is uniform. If 1, 2, 3 crows are black, so it is the case that all crows are black. So, in both the cases, the conclusion is drawn on the basis of the belief in the law of the uniformity of nature. Law of uniformity of nature works in both the cases, in case of scientific induction and in case of unscientific induction also. So, these are the similarities between scientific induction and unscientific induction. Now, let us explain the points of difference between scientific induction and unscientific induction. What are the differences? How they differ from each other, scientific induction and unscientific induction. Firstly, in scientific induction, the premises are derived from both simple observation and experiment. That means, when we establish the conclusion in case of scientific induction that all men are mortal, here after observation of some particular instances, so here simple observation is very much present. After observation of some particular instances, you are establishing with the help of inductive belief that all men are mortal. And when you say all men are mortal, you establish a relation between man and mortality through experiment. Through experiment, you establish a causal connection between man and mortality. And as humanity and mortality are causally related, so you can easily say that all men are mortal after observation of some cases. But in unscientific induction, the premises are derived from only simple observation. No experiment is there. That means, when you establish a conclusion that all crows are black, you first observe some instances that crows are black. So, observation is very much there, but no experiment is there, because blackness and crow there is no causal connection between them, and you cannot experiment that this crow is black because it is crow, or it is crow because it is black. You cannot say like that. So, in case of scientific induction, both observation and experiment is there, but in case of unscientific induction, simply observation is present, no experiment. Second point of difference, scientific induction justifies the inductive belief by relying on the law of causation and the law of the uniformity of nature. That means, when you say all men are mortal and question arises, how do you know all men are mortal? Then you rely on two principles, that law of causation and the law of the uniformity of nature. And the law of causation says that there is a causal connection between man and mortality. These two terms are causally related. And secondly, if these two terms are causally related in one instance, in one case, it will be true for all cases, as our law of uniformity of nature says that same thing will produce same effect under similar circumstances. So, with the help of these two laws, you can justify that all men are mortal. But unscientific induction is based only on the law of the uniformity of nature. Scientific induction is based on these two principles, law of causation and law of uniformity of nature, but unscientific induction is based only on the law of the uniformity of nature, because in unscientific induction no causal connection is proved or discovered. There is no causal connection between crow and blackness, as there is a causal connection between humanity and mortality. There is no such causal connection is established between crow and blackness, because in unscientific induction no causal connection is proved or discovered. The conclusion is actually based on uncontradicted experience only. Till today, you have find only black crows, no contradiction. So, you make a conclusion that maybe it is the case that all crows are black. So, unscientific induction is simply based on the law of the uniformity of nature, but law of causation is not there. Third point of difference between scientific induction and unscientific induction is that the conclusion of scientific induction is almost certain, but the conclusion of unscientific induction is only probable. Why? Because in case of scientific induction, you can establish a causal connection between humanity and mortality. So, if two terms are causally related, and our second law also says that same thing will produce same effect under similar circumstances. So, if one case is causally related, it will be true for all cases, and it will definitely be a certain one. So, the conclusion of scientific induction is almost certain, but the conclusion of unscientific induction is not certain, it is only probable, because there is no causal connection. In order to become a crow, a particular bird must be a black. That cannot be the, this is not true, that cannot be the case, because blackness is not the essential characteristics of a crow. A mortality is the essential characteristics of a man. They are causally connected, related. Causal connection is there, but there is no such causal connection is established in case of crows and blackness. If you can find one crow which is not black in color, your entire conclusion will be a false one. So, the conclusion of unscientific induction is not certain, it is only probable. Next points of difference is, in scientific induction, both the positive and negative instances are observed. That means all men are mortal. If a particular man is man, he is mortal. If it is not man, it is not mortal. Positive and negative instances are there. But in unscientific induction, the conclusion is drawn on the basis of observation of positive instances only. If you find one negative instance, your conclusion will be a false one. So, in scientific induction, both the positive and negative instances are observed, but in unscientific induction, the conclusion is drawn on the basis of observation of positive instances only, because one negative instance will establish the conclusion as a false. Next one, in scientific induction, it is not considered whether the number of instances are great. After discovering the causal connection, two or more instances are observed to reach a certain conclusion. But in case of unscientific induction, the greater the number of instances observed, the higher will be the degree of probability. That means, as you can find greater number of instances, the higher will be the degree of probability. If you can find many instances that crows are black, your conclusion will be a correct one. But if you find one single instance that crows are not black, your entire conclusion will be a false one. But in case of scientific induction, it is not necessary that you are to find the number of instances positively. As two terms are causally related, for example, humanity and mortality, it will be true for all cases. But in case of unscientific induction, as there is no causal connection is established, so the entire induction depends on number of instances, that means positive instances. Lastly, in scientific induction, elimination of irrelevant circumstances constitutes an important factor because it enables us to establish a causal connection. But in unscientific induction, such elimination is difficult because it is an observation based inference. In case of scientific induction, as it is based on causal connection, the example of scientific induction is based on causal connection. Here the elimination of irrelevant circumstances constitutes an important factor. In case of scientific induction, you can only take the relevant circumstances and irrelevant circumstances you can deny. But in unscientific induction, such elimination is not possible because it is an observation based inference. If one single case you observe which is negative, that means in case of that all crows are black, if you find one single instance where crows is not black, your entire conclusion will be a false one. So, elimination of irrelevant circumstances constitute an important factor for scientific induction only. It will not work in case of unscientific induction. So, these are the points of difference between scientific induction and unscientific induction. Let us stop here. In our next class, I will explain analogy. Thank you.